Let me be perfectly clear about something. When the Krellian Dominion High Command assigned me to study humanity, I thought I had won the galactic lottery. Soft-bodied bipeds with no natural armor, no venom sacs, no psionic abilities, nothing. They were supposed to be easy, simple, a quick research assignment that would pad my career file and get me promoted to a nice cushy administrative position somewhere far away from actual fieldwork. I was wrong. So catastrophically, horrifyingly, laughably wrong. My name is Commander Vext 4, and I have served the Krellian Dominion for 32 cycles. I have seen combat on 17 different worlds. I have stared down Thexan war beasts without flinching. I have negotiated peace treaties with species that communicate through controlled explosions. I considered myself experienced, competent, maybe even a little bit cocky. Then I met Lieutenant Renacade. But I am getting ahead of myself. Let me start at the beginning, back when I still thought humans were just another primitive species ripe for observation and cataloging, back when I still had the luxury of arrogance. The day started normally enough, if you can call anything normal aboard a research vessel floating in the dead of space. My crew had intercepted a small human military shuttle 3 rotations prior. Standard procedure. We disabled their propulsion systems with an electromagnetic pulse, tractored them aboard, and began our processing protocols. The shuttle contained 5 humans, 4 males, 1 female. The males were unconscious within moments of our sedative gas deployment. Standard reaction. Expected. Boring. Even. The female, though. She fought. Oh, how she fought. It took 4 of my security officers to subdue her, and even then, she managed to break Officer Threlnak's manipulator appendage before they finally got her restrained. I watched the whole thing through the observation monitors, sipping my morning nutrition supplement and chuckling at the futility of her resistance. Humans, I thought to myself, so emotional, so irrational, so perfectly hilariously outmatched. They dragged her to Processing Bay 7, and that is where things started to go sideways. Not dramatically, not yet, just small things. Little details that should have warned me. She was still conscious when they brought her in. Most species would have succumbed to our sedatives by then, but her eyes were open, tracking every movement, calculating. Her uniform was torn, blood streaming from a nasty gash across her left temple where she had collided with a bulkhead during the initial capture. Her service identification was still attached to her chest plate. Lieutenant Renacade, Human Defense Coalition, 3rd Reconnaissance Division. I activated the communication array and addressed her directly, because I am nothing if not professional. Also, I enjoy gloating. It is one of my few vices. Lieutenant Cade, I said, my translator converting my words into her crude Earth language. Welcome aboard the research vessel, Quantum Meridian. I am Commander Vexthor. You and your crew are now property of the Krellian Dominion, to be studied for the advancement of xenobiological science. I want you to know that we will treat you with all the care and consideration that valuable research specimens deserve. She did not scream, did not beg, did not even look particularly frightened. She smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. It was the kind of smile that predators wear, the kind that shows too many teeth and promises violence. Her lips pulled back, revealing those flat omnivorous teeth that humans possess, and she spoke in a voice roughened by pain and fury. You have made a terrible mistake. I laughed. Actually laughed. My dorsal ridges fluttered with amusement, which is the Krellian equivalent of a belly laugh. My science officer Quenma joined in, her chittering adding a harmonious counterpoint to my mirth. Yes, I replied, still chuckling. The traditional defiant last words. How original. How very entertaining. Please, do continue threatening us. It makes the data collection so much more interesting when the subjects have personality. Renacade said nothing else. She simply stared at me through the monitor screen, that smile never wavering, blood dripping steadily from her head wound and pooling on the deck plating beneath her. We secured her in Containment Cell 12, our most advanced holding facility. Force fields rated to contain species 3 times as strong as baseline humans. Atmospheric controls that could render the air toxic within seconds if needed. Surveillance monitors covering every cubic centimeter of space. She could not even twitch without us knowing about it. Or so I thought. Quinma began her preliminary scans immediately, her sensor arrays washing over the human female with clinical precision. Fascinating, she murmured, her vocalization organs creating that specific tone of scientific excitement. Commander, her cranial injury is quite severe. Hairline fractures throughout the left temporal bone. Subdural bleeding. By all our models she should be unconscious or at least severely impaired. Yet here she stands, I observed, watching Rena Kadi through the monitor. She had moved to the center of the cell and sat down cross-legged, her hands resting on her knees like she was meditating. Humans have demonstrated surprising pain tolerance in previous studies. Mark it in the file. Already done, Commander. Should we administer medical treatment? If the specimen expires before we complete our initial assessment, the High Command will not be pleased. I considered this. On one appendage, dead specimens were worthless for most of our research protocols. On the other appendage, I was curious to see exactly how much damage a human could sustain before their biological functions failed. Scientific curiosity won out, as it usually does. No treatment yet, I decided. Let us see how their natural healing capabilities function. We will monitor her vital signs. If she begins to deteriorate significantly, we can always intervene. We have the other 4 humans as backup subjects anyway. Quinma's approval radiated through her pheromone signature. Excellent reasoning, Commander. I shall prepare the dissection equipment for when this one inevitably expires. Her brain structure should provide valuable data, especially with the trauma already present. We both settled in to watch and wait. That was our second mistake. The first mistake was capturing her in the first place. For approximately 2 hours nothing happened. Rena Kadi sat perfectly still in the center of containment cell 12, her breathing steady, her eyes closed. The blood from her head wound had slowed to a trickle, coagulating in her matted hair. Her vitals remained stable if slightly elevated. Pulse rate 120 beats per minute, blood pressure higher than human baseline but not dangerously so. Respiratory rate normal. Boring. I am beginning to think humans are even less interesting than the report suggested, I commented to Quinma, who was hunched over her analysis console, tentacles dancing across holographic displays. Look at her. She just sits there. No escape attempts. No clever problem solving, just sitting. Quinma's optical clusters refocused on the monitor. Perhaps the cranial trauma has impaired her cognitive functions more than we initially assessed. Brain injuries can produce unpredictable results in carbon-based life forms. She may be experiencing confusion, disorientation, memory loss. Wonderful, I said flatly. We captured a broken specimen. High Command is going to be thrilled when I explain that our grand human research subject is essentially a vegetable. We still have the 4 males, Quinma reminded me, ever the optimist. And this one may yet prove useful. Even damaged neural tissue provides valuable data. We can map the injury patterns, study how human brains respond to trauma, document the degradation process. I waved a manipulator appendage dismissively. Fine. Continue monitoring. I need to file the preliminary report anyway. Make sure you alert me if she does anything remotely interesting. And by interesting, I mean anything other than sitting there bleeding on my nice clean deck plating. Quinma chittered acknowledgement, and I turned my attention to the mind-numbing bureaucracy that comes with command politions, capture reports, specimen intake forms, resource allocation requests, the glamorous life of a Krillian research commander. I was 3 paragraphs into my incident description when Quinma's alarm pheromones flooded the command center. Commander, she said, her voice tight with something I could not quite identify. Commander, you need to see this. I looked up from my report, irritation prickling along my dorsal ridge. What now? Did she fall over? Did she finally pass out? Please tell me something actually happened. She is awake, Quinma said slowly, and she is examining her wound. So, injured creatures often investigate their injuries. It is instinctive behavior, nothing remarkable about it. Commander, Quinma's optical clusters were fixed on the monitor screen, unblinking. Please, just look. I sighed, the sound translator rendering it as an exasperated huff, and turned my attention back to the containment cell feed. Rena Kadi was indeed awake. Her eyes were open, clear, focused, no sign of confusion nor disorientation. She had raised both hands to her head, fingers gently probing the wound at her left temple. Her expression was calm, almost clinical, like she was a medic examining someone else entirely. See? I said, checking her injury. Perfectly normal mammalian behavior. You interrupted my report for this? Wait, Quinma whispered. Keep watching. Rena's fingers traced the edges of the wound with delicate precision. She pressed gently here, then there, mapping the damage. Blood smeared across her fingertips, but she did not seem to care. Her lips moved, counting something under her breath. Numbers perhaps. Measurements. Then she did something that made my anterior breathing passages constrict. She smiled again. Not the angry, defiant smile from before. This one was different. Calculating. The smile of someone who had just solved a particularly difficult equation. That is unsettling, I admitted, but hardly cause for alarm. She is probably delirious from blood loss. Humans are known to exhibit irrational behavior when their circulatory systems are compromised. Her vital signs are stable, Quinwa countered, gesturing at the biometric readouts. No indication of delirium, no fever, no neural degradation. Commander, she is thinking. Planning something. I laughed, though it sounded forced even to my own auditory receptors. Planning what exactly? She is in a containment cell specifically designed to hold species far more dangerous than humans. The force field alone could stop a charging Thexian warbeast. What could one injured human possibly plan? Quinma did not answer. Her attention remained locked on the monitor. Renakade lowered her hands from her head wound. She looked directly at the surveillance camera as if she knew exactly where it was positioned, as if she knew we were watching. Then she spoke, her voice clear and steady despite her injuries. I need you to understand something, she said, each word pronounced with deliberate care. I am going to get out of this cell. I am going to take control of your ship. And I am going to find out where you are keeping the rest of my crew. She paused, tilting her head slightly, blood dripping down her neck. You can make this easy, or you can make this hard, but either way it is going to happen. I should have been amused. I should have laughed at the absurdity of her threat. A single wounded human against an entire Krillian research vessel. It was comedy. Pure, ridiculous comedy. But something in her eyes stopped the laughter before it could form. She was not bluffing. She was not posturing. She was making a simple statement of fact, like announcing the time or describing the weather. Increase the surveillance monitoring, I ordered Quinma, my voice sharper than I intended. I want every sensor focused on that cell. Document everything she does. Every movement, every expression, every word. Already done, Commander. Quinma replied. Should we sedate her? We have gas emitters in the cell. We could render her unconscious within seconds. I considered it. The smart move would be to flood the cell with sedatives immediately, eliminate any potential threat before it could materialize. But I was curious, fatally, stupidly curious. No, I decided. Let her try. Let her exhaust herself against the force field. It will provide excellent data on human persistence behaviors and problem-solving capabilities under stress. Besides, I want to see what she thinks she can accomplish. Quinma's pheromone signature shifted to concern, but she did not argue. She simply adjusted her sensor arrays and continued monitoring. Renakade stood up slowly, testing her balance. She swayed slightly, caught herself, then straightened. Blood had soaked through her uniform collar, staining the fabric dark red. Her face was pale, but her expression remained focused. She walked to the force field barrier, stopping just centimeters from its shimmering surface. She reached out one hand, letting her fingers hover near the energy field without quite touching it. Fascinating, Quinma murmured. She is studying the containment system, trying to find weaknesses perhaps. Good luck with that, I said, confidence returning. That force field has been tested against every known escape method. Chemical attacks, physical force, electromagnetic interference, even psionic manipulation. Nothing gets through. Renakade pulled her hand back. She nodded once, as if confirming something to herself. Then she turned away from the force field and walked back to the center of the cell. She sat down again, cross-legged, hands on her knee, and she waited. What is she doing? Quinma asked, confusion evident in her vocal harmonics. I have absolutely no idea, I admitted. We watched her sit there for another 30 minutes. She did not move, did not speak, just breathed steadily, eyes half closed, like she was conserving energy. Preparing. But preparing for what? 43 minutes after Renakade stopped moving, something changed. Her breathing pattern shifted, slower, deeper, like she was oxygenating her system for physical exertion. Her hands, which had been resting loosely on her knees, curled into fists, not tense, not aggressive, just ready. Commander, Quinma said, her sensor tentacles twitching with anticipation. Her adrenaline levels are spiking, cortisol production increasing, endorphin release detected. She is entering a heightened physiological state. Fight or flight response, I observed, leaning forward in my command chair. Classic mammalian stress reaction. Still nothing we have not seen before. Perhaps, Quinma said, but her tone suggested doubt. Rena Kadade opened her eyes fully. She took one more deep breath, held it for a count of 5, then exhaled slowly through her nose. Her jaw clenched, her shoulders squared. Then she raised both hands to her head wound. "Here we go," I muttered. "She is going to try to stop the bleeding. Probably tear strips from her uniform to make a bandage. Textbook survival behavior. I was wrong. So wrong." Rena's fingers found the edges of the wound again, probing carefully. She tilted her head, feeling along the skull beneath the torn skin. Her expression was focused, clinical, like a surgeon preparing for a delicate procedure. Then she pressed down, hard. "What is she doing?" Quinma's voice rose an octave, alarm pheromones saturating the air around her workstation. "I do not know," I said, unable to look away from the monitor. I do not understand what I am seeing." Rena Cade was not trying to stop the bleeding. She was making it worse. Her fingers dug into the wound, prying at something, working with terrible purpose. Blood flowed fresh and hot down the side of her face. But she did not stop, did not even flinch. Her face twisted not in agony but in concentration, like she was trying to open a particularly stubborn container. "Her pain receptors must be firing at maximum capacity," Quinma said, her voice tight with horrified fascination. "The neural signals, Commander. They are off the scale. She should be unconscious. She should be screaming. She should be. What is she doing?" Rena's fingers found purchase on something inside the wound. She braced herself, took another deep breath and pulled. The sound that came through the audio pickups was wet, grinding, horrible, bone scraping against bone, tissue tearing, blood spattering onto the cell floor. And then she was holding something in her right hand. A piece of her own skull, roughly triangular, maybe 5 centimeters long, one edge relatively smooth where it had fractured cleanly, the other edges jagged, irregular, sharp. "No," I heard myself say. "No, that is not possible. That is not rational behavior. That violates every principle of self-preservation. That is insane." Rena Cat examined the bone fragment with the same clinical detachment she had shown when probing the wound. She tested its weight, its balance. She ran her thumb carefully along the sharpest edge, nodding in satisfaction when it drew a thin line of blood. Then she looked directly at the surveillance camera again, and she held up the skull fragment like a trophy. "This is what you wanted to study, right?" she said, her voice steady despite what she had just done to herself. "Human adaptability, human resilience, human willingness to do whatever it takes to survive." She stood up, blood streaming down her face, pooling in the hollow of her collarbone, soaking into her uniform. The wound in her head was enormous now, a gaping crater where she had excavated her own bone. I could see exposed tissue, glimpses of membrane beneath. She should have been dead, should have been convulsing on the floor, should have been anything except standing there holding a piece of her own skull like it was the most natural thing in the galaxy. "Well," she continued, her voice taking on a quality I can only describe as cheerful malice. "Congratulations, you are about to get a very thorough education." "Sedate her," I shouted at Quinma, my composure finally shattering. "Flood the cell. Now. Right now." Quinma's manipulators flew across her console, initiating gas release, activating emergency sedation protocol, deploying countermeasures. Rena moved before the gas could even begin to flow. She sprinted toward the force field, and I thought, good, excellent, she is going to knock herself unconscious running into the barrier. Problem solved, crisis averted. She did not run into the force field. She dropped to the floor at the last possible second, sliding across the blood-slicked deck plating on her back, and thrust the skull fragment upward into the force field emitter node embedded in the floor near the barrier edge. I did not even know those nodes were vulnerable to physical damage. They were supposed to be shielded, protected, fail-safe. But Renacadid had found the one microscopic gap in the shielding, the one place where the emitter housing met the deck plating, a space barely 2 millimeters wide, just wide enough for a sharp piece of bone. The fragment punched through the gap and into the emitter's power coupling. Sparks exploded outward. The force field flickered, stuttered, and died. Alarms screamed throughout the ship. Emergency lighting activated, bathing everything in red. Automated warnings blared in 3 different languages. Containment breach in Cell 12. Containment breach in Cell 12. Security teams respond immediately. Renacade rolled to her feet in one smooth motion, still holding the blood-soaked skull fragment. She was smiling again. That same predator smile. I told you, she said softly. Easy or hard? You chose hard. Seal the sector. I screamed at Quinma. Drop the blast doors. Vent the atmosphere. Do something. Blast doors require 30 seconds to deploy, Quinma replied, her voice vibrating with panic. Security team is en route. Estimated arrival 2 minutes. Commander, she is moving, she is leaving the cell, she is. Renegade stepped through the empty doorway where the force field had been. Free. A human had just escaped our most secure containment cell, using a piece of her own skull as a weapon. This is not happening, I said, staring at the monitor in absolute disbelief. This cannot be happening. But it was happening. And it was about to get so much worse. Renegade looked at the skull fragment in her hand, testing its weight again. Then she looked up at the nearest surveillance camera, directly at me, and spoke 4 words that still haunt my sleep cycles. Who is next? She turned and ran down the corridor, leaving bloody footprints and the shattered remains of my professional confidence in her wake. Send everyone, I told Quinma, my voice hollow. Send every security officer on the ship. Send them all. Commander, surely one injured human cannot possibly. Send them all, I repeated, watching Renegade's retreating form on the monitors, and tell them to be ready for anything. Because if there was one thing I had learned in the last 5 minutes, it was that humans were capable of absolutely anything, even weaponizing their own broken bodies, especially that. Security Team Alpha reached the containment sector first. 6 trained Krillian officers, each equipped with neural disruptors, kinetic restraints, and enough tactical experience to handle dangerous specimens. They moved in standard formation, covering angles, communicating through pheromone signals that no human should have been able to detect or interpret. I watched through the corridor cameras, feeling a flicker of relief. 6 against 1. 6 trained soldiers against 1 injured human with a piece of bone. The odds were overwhelmingly in our favor. The odds, as it turned out, meant absolutely nothing. Renegade was waiting for them. Not hiding, not cowering, not trying to run, waiting. She had positioned herself at a corridor junction, pressed flat against the wall just beyond the camera's primary viewing angle. I could barely see her on the monitor, just a shadow, a suggestion of movement. Alpha Team rounded the corner in perfect formation, weapons raised, scanning for threats. She moved. I have watched the footage 17 times since that day, trying to understand exactly what happened, trying to make sense of the sequence of events. It still looks impossible. Renegade stepped out from the wall and drove the skull fragment into the lead officer's optical cluster before he could even register her presence. She twisted the bone shard, used his body as a pivot point, and swung herself around to kick the second officer's weapon arm. The neural disruptor went flying. She caught it midair with her free hand. 3 seconds. That is how long the entire engagement lasted. 3 seconds. The neural disruptor fired, and the second officer collapsed. The third officer tried to grab her, but she ducked under his reaching manipulators and slashed the skull fragment across his sensory organs. He screamed, a sound I had never heard a Krellian make before, high and keening and full of pain. The remaining 3 officers opened fire. Renegade used the partially blinded officer as a shield, dragging him in front of her as neural disruptor bolts peppered his carapace. He convulsed unconscious before he hit the deck. She dropped him and rolled forward, coming up inside the firing line too close for the weapons to track her effectively. The skull fragment flashed in the red emergency lighting. Once, twice, 3 times, precision strikes to vulnerable joints, sensory organs, nerve clusters. Alpha Team went down. All of them. In under 15 seconds. That is not possible, I heard myself say, my vocalization organs barely functioning. That is not. She is injured. She is bleeding. She should be in shock. She should be weak. She is still moving, Commander. Quinma interrupted, her voice thin with terror. Heading towards Section 4. That is where we are holding the other human specimens. Of course she was heading there. She had told us exactly what she was going to do. We just had not believed her. Deploy Beta and Gamma teams, I ordered, forcing my brain to function through the haze of disbelief. Have them converge on Section 4 from opposite directions. Pincer movement. She cannot fight on 2 fronts simultaneously. Deploying now, Commander. I watched the tactical display as the 2 security teams moved into position. 12 more officers. All armed. All prepared. Surely 12 would be enough. Surely the first team had just been caught off guard, surprised by her unexpected aggression. Now, we knew what we were dealing with. Now we were ready. We were not ready. Renegade hit Beta Team in an auxiliary maintenance shaft, a narrow corridor where they could not effectively surround her or use their numbers to advantage. She had somehow accessed the ship's internal structure map, probably from a wall terminal. She had studied our layout, identified choke points, planned her route. She was not running blindly through the ship. She was hunting. The maintenance shaft became a killing box. Beta Team could only approach 2 at a time in the narrow space. Renegade met them head-on, and I swear to every deity in the Krillian pantheon she was laughing. Blood covered half her face, pouring from the crater in her skull, and she was laughing like this was the most entertaining thing she had done in years. The skull fragment darted and weaved like a living thing. The stolen neural disruptor fired with mechanical precision. Officers fell one after another, their training and equipment meaningless against this wounded human who refused to act like prey. Gamma Team, abort approach. I shouted into the communications array. She is in the maintenance shaft. She has the tactical advantage. Pull back and regroup. Pull back. Too late. Renegade emerged from the maintenance shaft directly behind Gamma Team. Behind them, she had somehow circled around, used the ship's architecture against us, turned our own ambush into hers. She dropped 2 officers before they even knew she was there. The remaining 4 turned, weapons tracking, but she was already moving, staying low, using their own bodies as cover. The skull fragment found kidney analogs, major nerve clusters, anything that would incapacitate quickly. Gamma Team fell. 18 security officers, 18 trained, armed, prepared soldiers, all defeated by 1 human with a piece of her own skull. Commander, Quinma said, and I had never heard such fear in her voice before. Commander, she is adapting, learning. Every engagement she fights better, faster, more efficiently. She is studying us, Commander. She is learning how we move, how we think, how we fight. She is supposed to be dying, I said, numbly staring at the monitors. The blood loss alone should have killed her by now. The trauma, the pain, the shock. She should be dying. On the screen, Renegade paused in the corridor, leaning against a wall. She was breathing hard now. I could see her chest heaving. Blood dripped steadily from her chin, pattering onto the deck. For a moment, just a moment, she looked almost human, almost vulnerable. Then she straightened, adjusted her grip on the skull fragment, checked the charge on the neural disruptor, and kept moving. Toward Section 4, toward the other humans, toward us. Seal the bridge, I ordered, my voice cracking. Maximum security protocols. Every blast door between her and us. Every countermeasure we have. Commander, that will take 3 minutes to fully deploy. Then deploy them now, I screamed. Right now. Immediately do it. Quinma's manipulators flew across the console. Throughout the ship, heavy blast doors began sliding into place, sealing corridors, isolating sections, emergency bulkheads engaged, atmospheric containment fields activated. I watched Renegade on the monitors, watched her navigate through our defensive measures like she had memorized the ship's entire layout. She slid under a closing blast door with centimeters to spare. She bypassed a security lock using a trick I did not even know was possible. She moved with purpose, with direction, with absolute certainty. She was not just escaping anymore. She was coming for us. How many security personnel do we have left? I asked Quinma, already knowing I would not like the answer. 4 officers, Commander. Plus the bridge crew. 4. We had started with 24. Now we had 4. And 1 human. 1 impossibly determined, impossibly dangerous human who had turned herself into a weapon. This was supposed to be simple research, I said quietly, watching Renegade eliminate another security checkpoint with brutal efficiency. We were just supposed to study them, document their biology, write a nice report, get promoted. Commander, she is 2 sections away from the bridge. 90 seconds, maybe less. I looked at Quinma, at her fear scent filling the command center, at her trembling sensory organs. I looked at the other bridge crew, all staring at their consoles like they could wish this situation away through sheer force of will. Open a communication channel to her, I said. Direct. No filters. I want to talk to this human. Commander, is that wise? Wise. I laughed, the sound bitter and defeated. Nothing about this situation is wise. Open the channel. Quinma complied. A holographic display flickered to life, showing Renegade's face. That ruined, blood-soaked, terrifying face. She looked directly at the camera, directly at me, and smiled that predator smile. Hello, Commander Vexter, she said pleasantly, like we were having a casual conversation over drinks. I am almost there. Is there something you wanted to say before we meet in person? My dorsal ridges flattened in submission. I hated myself for it, but I could not stop the involuntary response. What do you want? I asked. Her smile widened. We are going to negotiate. The final blast door separating Renacada from the bridge held for exactly 47 seconds. She used the neural disruptor to overload the locking mechanism, frying the circuits with sustained fire until the magnetic seals failed. Then she used the skull fragment to pry open the emergency manual release. The door groaned, resisted, and finally surrendered to her determination. She stepped onto the bridge. The last 4 security officers opened fire immediately. Neural disruptor bolts lit up the bridge in strobing flashes of blue-white energy. Renacada dove behind a control console, rolled, came up firing. 2 officers dropped. She threw the depleted neural disruptor at the 3rd officer, hitting him square in the sensory cluster. While he was stunned, she closed the distance and put him down with 3 quick strikes of the skull fragment. The 4th officer, young Kelvax, barely 2 cycles out of training, dropped his weapon and raised his manipulators in surrender. Smart kid. Renacada pointed at him with the bloody skull fragment. Stand over there. Do not move. Do not make me regret letting you live. Kelvax scrambled to the corner she indicated, his fear scent so strong it made my eyes water. Then Renacada turned her attention to the bridge crew, to Quinma specifically. She moved faster than I thought possible for someone who had lost so much blood. One moment she was standing near the security station, the next she was behind Quinma's chair, one arm wrapped around my science officer's thorax, the skull fragment pressed against the vulnerable soft tissue of her throat. Everyone stays very, very calm, Renacada said, her voice steady despite the blood still dripping from her ruined head. Nobody does anything heroic. Nobody tries to be clever. We are all going to have a nice professional conversation, and then I am going to leave. Clear. I raised my manipulators, slowly, deliberately. Crystal clear, Lieutenant Cade. You have made your point rather emphatically. What do you want? Information, she said simply. You captured 5 humans from our shuttle. 4 males, 1 female. Me. I want to know where the males are. I want their status, their condition, and I want to know what you have done to them. They are fine, I said quickly. Unconscious. Sedated. Unharmed. We have not begun any invasive procedures. They are in Medical Bay 3 standard containment. All vital signs normal. Renacada's eyes narrowed. Prove it. Show me their biometric readings, now. I gestured to one of the bridge technicians. Display Medical Bay 3 monitoring data. Full transparency. Give her what she wants. The technician complied with admirable speed, projecting holographic displays of 4 human males in medical containment pods. Heart rates, brain activity, respiratory function, all clearly visible and well within normal parameters. Renacada studied the displays for a long moment, her grip on Quinma never loosening. Which one is Corporal Hayes? The one with the scar on his left arm. I checked the identification tags on the displays. Pod 7, lower left screen. She looked, nodded. Some of the tension in her shoulders eased fractionally. Good. That is good. Now, next question. Why did you capture us? What is the purpose of this research vessel? What do you want with humans? Scientific inquiry, I said honestly, because at this point lying seemed counterproductive. The Krellian Dominion encountered human vessels 6 cycles ago. We found your species fascinating, unusual, worth studying. This vessel was dispatched to collect specimens and gather data. Specimens, Renacada repeated, her voice flat. You kidnapped military personnel for scientific study. You were planning to dissect us. Eventually, yes, I admitted. After thorough observation and non-invasive analysis. It is standard protocol. We mean no disrespect to your species, Lieutenant. This is simply what we do. What we have always done. Knowledge advancement requires sacrifice. The skull fragment pressed harder against Quinma's throat. My science officer whimpered, a sound I had never heard her make before. How many? Renacada asked quietly. How many humans have you taken? How many ships have you intercepted? I hesitated. This was information the Dominion considered classified. Operational security. Need to know basis only. The skull fragment drew a thin line of blood on Quinma's throat. 17, I said quickly. 17 interception missions over the past 6 cycles. Approximately 140 human specimens collected across the fleet. Not just this vessel. Multiple research ships. Renecade's face went very still, very quiet. When she spoke again, her voice was cold enough to freeze atmosphere. 140 people. You took 140 human beings from their lives, their families, their duties, and you catalogued them like insects. We did not know, I said, and I realized with surprise that I meant it. We did not know you were a fully sentient species with complex social structures. Your technology is relatively primitive, your territorial expansion limited. We assumed. We thought. You thought we would not notice, Renegade finished. You thought you could just steal us and study us and we would never fight back. Never resist. Never make you pay for it. Yes, I said simply. There was no point in denying it. Where are they? She demanded. The other 135 humans. Which vessels? Which sectors? I want locations, coordinates, everything. I do not have that information on this ship, I said. That data is stored in the Dominion Central Database. Only High Command has access to the complete distribution records. Then get me access, Renegade said. Right now. Hack it, break into it, steal it, I do not care how. You have 30 seconds to start making progress, or Quinma here becomes a biology experiment of her own. I looked at my science officer, at the terror in her optical clusters. I looked at Renegade, at the absolute determination in her eyes. I looked at the skull fragment, that piece of bone she had ripped from her own head, and turned into a weapon of terrifying effectiveness. This human had fought through 24 security officers, multiple containment systems, and enough sedative gas to drop a Thexian war beast. She had done it with a head wound that should have killed her 3 times over. She had done it because 4 other humans needed her. 4 people. She had done all of this for 4 people. What would she do for 140? Start accessing the Dominion network, I told my communications officer. Priority override codes. Everything we have. Give her what she wants. Because I was finally beginning to understand something important. Humans were not specimens. They were not research subjects. They were not primitive curiosities to be studied and dissected. They were something far more dangerous than that. They were survivors. And they did not forget. And they did not forgive. And they absolutely under no circumstances left their people behind. Good choice, Commander, Renegade said. You are learning. Slowly, but you are learning. The communications officer began working frantically, manipulators flying across the console, trying to breach the Dominion's security protocols, and I stood there on my own bridge, taken hostage by a single human with a piece of her own skull, and wondered how spectacularly my career had just ended. It took the communications officer 17 minutes to break through the Dominion security protocols. 17 minutes of watching Renegade stand perfectly still behind Quinma, blood dripping steadily onto the deck plating, that skull fragment never wavering from my science officer's throat. 17 minutes of listening to her breathing, slow and controlled despite the catastrophic injury she had inflicted upon herself. 17 minutes of understanding with absolute clarity that we had made a terrible mistake. When the data finally appeared on the holographic displays, Renegade's eyes tracked across it with frightening speed. Ship designations, sector coordinates, specimen distribution logs. Everything the Dominion had collected about human abductions over the past 6 cycles. Download it, she ordered. All of it. Portable storage device. Now. The communications officer looked at me. I nodded. What else could I do? 3 minutes later, Renegade had a data chip containing every piece of information the Kryllian Dominion had gathered about humanity. Our observations. Our research protocols. Our fleet positions. Our collection schedules. Everything. She slipped the chip into a pocket of her blood-soaked uniform, then finally released Quinma. My science officer scrambled away gasping, her manipulators trembling as she checked her throat for serious damage. Thank you for your cooperation, Commander, Renegade said, stepping back toward the bridge entrance. You have been surprisingly reasonable for someone who kidnaps people for science experiments. What are you going to do now? I asked, genuinely curious despite everything. She smiled that predator smile one last time. I am going to take one of your shuttles. I am going to return to human space. And I am going to make sure every ship, every station, every colony knows exactly what the Kryllian Dominion has been doing. Then we are going to come get our people back. The Dominion will consider that an act of war, I said quietly. Good, Renegade replied. Because it is. You started it. We are going to finish it. She backed out of the bridge, still holding the skull fragments. Still watching us with those calculating human eyes. When she reached the corridor, she paused. "One more thing, Commander. Medical Bay 3. Release codes for the containment pods. I am not leaving without my crew." Of course she was not. I provided the codes. She disappeared down the corridor, and 15 minutes later our sensors registered a shuttle launch. Unauthorized. Uncontested. Because honestly, who was going to stop her at this point? I watched the shuttle accelerate away from the quantum meridian, heading toward the nearest transit point, carrying 5 humans and enough classified information to start an interstellar incident. "Should we pursue, Commander?" Quinma asked, her voice still shaky. "With what?" I replied. "The 24 unconscious security officers, the traumatized bridge crew, you." She did not answer. "Begin revival procedures for all incapacitated personnel," I ordered. "And somebody get me a direct channel to Dominion High Command. They are going to want to hear about this immediately." That was 3 cycles ago. I am filing this report from a very comfortable office on the Krillian homeworld, because despite the spectacular failure of my mission, High Command decided I was too valuable to execute. Apparently being the only commander to survive direct contact with a hostile human makes me an expert by default. Lucky me. The Dominion has quietly suspended all human specimen collection operations. We have also begun fortifying our border regions and significantly upgrading our security protocols, because Renegade kept her promise. She told them. She told everyone. Humanity knows about us now, and they are not happy. Intelligence reports suggest they are currently mounting rescue operations to recover the 140 abducted personnel. Early results indicate they are succeeding. Violently. Efficiently, with the same terrifying determination that one human showed when she turned her own broken skull into a weapon. I have been asked to provide tactical assessments, behavioral predictions, strategic recommendations for dealing with potential human aggression. My reports are detailed, thorough, and professional, but they all end the same way. Recommendation: stay away from humans, do not engage them, do not capture them, do not threaten them, do not give them any reason whatsoever to focus their attention on you. Because humans, I have learned, are not like other species. They do not accept captivity gracefully. They do not surrender when injured. They do not abandon their own. And when you hurt them, when you take what is theirs, when you make them your enemy, they will do absolutely anything to hurt you back. They will weaponize their own bodies if necessary. They will fight through injuries that should kill them. They will learn, adapt, and overcome obstacles that should be insurmountable. The Dominion wanted to study human resilience, wanted to understand what makes them tick, wanted to catalog their fascinating biological quirks and survival characteristics. Well, we got our answer. Humans are resilient because they refuse to accept any other option. They survive because dying would mean failing the people who depend on them. They overcome because the alternative is unthinkable. I think about Renegade sometimes during my sleep cycles. I think about that moment when she reached up to her own head wound and made the decision that no sane being should ever make. The decision to break herself further to forge a weapon. The decision to endure unimaginable pain because 4 other humans needed her to endure it. I think about what she said to me on that bridge. "You started it. We are going to finish it." I believe her. The Krillian Dominion has encountered many species in our expansion across the galaxy. We have studied hundreds of alien biologies, documented thousands of behavioral patterns, established ourselves as the premier xenobiological research civilization in 3 sectors. But we have never encountered anything like humans. And if I have any influence over Dominion policy going forward, we never will again. Because some specimens, it turns out, are better left unstudied. Some species are better left alone. And some battles are better left unfought, especially when your opponent is willing to crack open their own skull and use the pieces to cut their way to freedom. I learned that lesson the hard way. The Dominion can learn it the easy way. Stay away from humans. For all our sakes, stay away.